to select. Go, let's go.
Boys, here we go. It's here. We finally get to see all of our fantasy players in action.
That's not true.
No, that is not true. That is likely.
I drafted a lot of Christian Watson and Mark Andrews.
Likely
man.
not true. I'm Jamie Eisenberg. That's Dave Richard. That's Keith Cummings. This is Fantasy Football today on CBS Sports HQ. So, guys, here we are, week one. What are you looking forward to the most?
Anthony Richardson. It's the greatest athlete ever to test at the combine as a quarterback in an offense where he might get to run it 10 times a game. I can't wait to see him rushing the football today.
Where did Bijan Robinson rank on the all-athlete scale at the combine?
He was very good as well.
He was very good. That's who I can't wait to see, but that's only one of two things that I can't wait to see. I have had this big old box in my office.
What's in the box?
What's in the box? It even says so right here, but it's a gift for you.
It's a gift for me. Okay.
It is a gift for you, and I don't want you to ever think again that people around the league don't pay attention to the things you say. A year ago at this time, who could he not stop talking about and hyping up?
This is fun.
Well, an NFL team got word of it, and sure enough, DJ Moore wanted to send his appreciation for you having his back, and this is a gift for you from DJ, wishing you the best of luck this year. And I think he's going to try and make up for what happened last year. Show him the ball, Heath.
That is fantastic.
It is an autographed DJ Moore football.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you to DJ. Thank you to the Chicago Bears. Heath, have a great season.
I love this. Exactly what I wanted to be thinking about this morning was DJ Moore at the start of last year.
Hey,
listen, thank you very much.
DJ Moore, we might not have thought he's going to be the healthiest receiver in that game, but he is going to be the healthiest receiver in that game because Christian Watson not going to play, and Romeo Doubs is dealing with his hamstring injury of his own. We'll get to that in a second, but let's start with the big stories that we're following here, leading you up to setting those lineups, and it starts with the tight end position. So we already had Travis Kelce out for Thursday night. That was not fun. And now we have Mark Andrews not expected to play, according to the NFL Network, in that game against the Houston Texans. So we're dealing with Andrews with the quad injury. What does this mean now for the other tight ends that are not going to the tight ends are going to be looking to replace him? Because we also have Darren Waller expected to go. We have George Kittle expected to play as well, but still dealing with some injuries. So without Mark Andrews there, here's some options that you could be looking at off the waiver wire. We'll start to talk through some of these guys, but starting in Baltimore, what does this mean for Isaiah Likely and then the receiver stepping up as well?
We saw him step up Isaiah Likely last year in this Ravens offense when Andrews didn't play. His numbers were phenomenal. But this is a different version of that offense, complete with three receivers that weren't on the field with Likely last year. You've got Rashad Bateman, who's trying to come back from his own injury. You've got Zay Flowers, the former first-round pick, or the current rookie first-round pick. I guess Bateman's the former first-round pick. Odell Beckham was a former first-round pick. He's trying to make a comeback claim. I'm nervous about Likely. I ended up ranking him in my top 12 in PPR. He's a low-end starter for me. I don't feel great about it, but I also don't feel great about a lot of tight ends this week. So he's someone that if I'm in a pinch and I had Andrews, sure, I'll go and get him. But if I can find Juwan Johnson, I still like Juwan Johnson better than Isaiah Likely.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same spot. I think maybe just a little bit lower. The interesting thing last year was it was an offense that was designed for the tight end to see 30 or 40% of the targets with no other wide receivers around him. Now, both of those things are gone, I think. So it will be interesting to see if he steps into the full Mark Andrews role, and if the full Mark Andrews role is as big as it was last year. I would still start Gerald Everett over him, so I'm a little bit lower.
We'll get to Gerald Everett in a second. He's in top 5 tight end for me. In 3 games last year, he played at least 50% of the snaps. He was a top 10 tight end. And so 2 of those games, he was top 5. And so you mentioned last year's offense not having those guys on the field. It was a much slower offense. They're going to throw the ball a lot more this year. They're going to throw a lot more in this game.
Does that mean more targets for him? With all those other receivers,
we're going to find out. But you said something very telling. I don't love a lot of the tight ends this week. And so for a guy that profiles like this, who has gotten this opportunity before and stepped up in this opportunity before, you pick him up off waivers and you play him, for me, over Gerald Everett, over Juwan Johnson, over Jake Ferguson, 3 guys that I was excited about. But this guy's got just that much more upside. Again, this could be Lamar Jackson's go-to guy because, again, the familiarity that he has with that type of player and that type of position. We saw some other names up there. Dave, you mentioned Juwan Johnson. Heath, you mentioned Gerald Everett. Let's start with Gerald Everett. So taking on the Dolphins, you've been talking about about him all week. Last time we saw him back-to-back games with touchdowns, but now he's facing the Vic Fangio offense that you still think will have some success against.
Yeah, I think he will have some success again. This Dolphins team, bottom 5 last year in terms of fantasy points allowed to tight ends. And it's not just Vic Fangio new in Miami. It's Kellen Moore new in Los Angeles. And we've seen Kellen Moore turn Dalton Schultz into a must-start tight end. I would expect Everett to have a pretty decent-sized role for as long as he can stay healthy. He's had a hard time doing that in his career. Because look how he started last year when he was 100%. 13 or more fantasy points in 3 of his first 4 games. I think he gets off to that type of start this year. I have him as a top 10 tight end.
Just one follow on that, just because we've seen Kellen Moore's offense without a lot of wide receivers.
Right.
And Dalton Schultz has stepped up as the second guy there. You got Mike Williams, you got Keenan Allen, you got Quentin Johnson, you got Josh Palmer, you got Austin Eckler. Is Gerald Everett going to get enough targets?
I think they had a top 12 tight end. Actually, the year they had CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. So, yeah, I think that role, about 15% of the targets are still going to tight ends.
All right, so your guy, Dave, in terms of just looking at the rankings of the guys that we're talking about off waivers, Juwan Johnson, you mentioned him. So he's got also a crowded receiving core because Michael Thomas is healthy, Rashid Shaheed is healthy, obviously Chris Olave is there. They don't have the running back catching the ball in the backfield, at least we don't expect. But Juwan Johnson, I've liked him all offseason. Is he going to have a big first game against the Titans?
I think he's got a shot because this is another defense that hasn't been great against opposing tight ends, and Juwan Johnson is more than just a tight end. Remember, they asked him this offseason, learn from Julian Edelman's routes. That's not what you usually hear when it comes to tight ends, is to go and copy a slot receiver. So are they going to use him as a big slot? We've heard about a lot of teams using their tight end in that role. It's kind of what Gerald Everett might end up being for the Chargers. It's what Isaiah Likely might end up being for the Baltimore Ravens. But we've got it for the Saints. Derek Carr has a nice track record of leaning on his tight ends in the past. And this preseason, played 75% of the snaps with Derek Carr. That's a high for Juwan Johnson. Last year, 6 of his last 10 games, at least 10 PPR points in those games. So I think that he's got a good opportunity to go out and maybe become an every week starter. That's another reason why I would take him over Isaiah Likely. Even if he's not as good as Likely this week, I think he's got more staying power in fantasy.
I don't disagree with that. The only thing I'll say is we don't know how long Mark Andrews might be out. And if Isaiah Likely is anything close to what he was last year, he could be a top 5 tight end for that stretch. So again, it's a risk-reward type of gamble if you want to play the long-term card. If we could just show the graphic again of the guys that we're looking at here, I just want to bring up a couple other names. Taysom Hill in the same game for the Saints. Don't be surprised if you see him getting a lot of carries, more so than usual, because no Kendre Miller for the Saints, obviously no Alvin Kamara for the Saints, and so Hill might be the backup running back to Jamal Williams. So not a bad plug and play if you can still use him as a tight end on your platform. Jake Ferguson's in that offense, not with Kellen Moore, but Dak Prescott has loved his tight ends, and not only that, he has loved his tight ends against the Giants. The last 4 meetings against the Giants, Dak has 3 touchdowns to his tight ends against this defense, so we'll see how things go there for him. And then one more guy I think is worth taking a look at is, just in case, if you got enough bench spots, maybe something happens to Darren Waller in the Sunday night game, put Daniel Bellinger on your bench just in case you swap him in if you can't get Ferguson, just with the unlikely situation of Darren Waller not playing. As of now, he is expected to go. All right, I wish we had better news, but we got more injuries that we're dealing with here. Cooper Kupp has been placed on IR. He is out for the next 4 games. He is certainly out for this week's game against Seattle. Let's talk about the replacement options for him. You got Van Jefferson, who's 45% rostered on CBSSports.com leagues. Puka Nacua, who is at 7% rostership on our site as well, taking on Seattle. So, Heath, which of the 2 guys do you prefer, and would you consider starting either one of them? You could throw Tutu Atwell in there as well.
I definitely prefer Van Jefferson for this week. He is inside of my top 40 wide receivers. I think a fine low-end number 3 option if you lost Kupp and you need to start 3 wide receivers. I actually prefer Puka Nacua if I'm just picking one of these guys up to put on my bench, because I've got a pretty good idea, I think, what Van Jefferson's upside is. And I think it's pretty similar to what we have him ranked this week. It's when there's nobody else there, maybe he'll get enough targets to fall into a wide receiver 3 week. Puka Nacua, though, a little bit more upside. So if I'm stashing one, it's Nacua. If I'm starting one today, it's Jefferson.
All right, so unfortunately, you're not going to have Cooper Kupp for the next 4 weeks, but one guy we did not mention in terms of the tight ends, Dave, he is available in about 20% of leagues on our site, so maybe some 10-team formats you might be able to pick him up, is Tyler Higbee, and he's got a great matchup against Seattle. What do you think about him?
I love him. I've got him as a top 7 fantasy tight end in PPR, and I also think because he was drafted as a late pick, you might be able to trade for him within the next couple of hours. Get him for one of your bench players, and you've got a starting tight end. That's a move that I'm I'm trying to make in a couple of my leagues where I have Mark Andrews. I need a tight end to start. Higbee's someone that could get us off to a great start, not just in week 1, but for at least the next 4 weeks as what should be the primary target. And this is another reason why starting Van Jefferson or Puka Nacua, not a great idea in fantasy, because we've seen Higbee as the number 1 target before. He gets a lot of work. He gets a lot of catches. That's someone who should finish as a good tight end this week in fantasy.
Just have to worry because of the offensive line concerns. How much blocking will he have to do if the Seattle pass rush is on Matthew Stafford? So we'll see. But Higbee definitely has top 10 upside for this week, and maybe Cam Akers gets a boost as well. So we'll see about that. Dave, you mentioned this off the top of the show. Christian Watson is not going to play for the Packers, and we got the report also that Romeo Doubs is going to be a little bit limited as well. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury, so makes sense of the Packers receiving core. In fact, and another guy here that could be a tight end replacement, and that's Luke Musgrave.
Musgrave, the rookie tight end for Green Bay. He should see an uptick in targets too. But I'm also looking at Jaden Reed. They've got 2 rookies. Musgrave's one, Jaden Reed's the other one. That's a healthy receiver in Green Bay. He's going to play in the slot a lot. And he came into the NFL as a pretty well-established but solid receiver out of Michigan State. Not somebody that's going to set the world on fire, but he's going to get opportunities in this game because Dobbs is limited, because Christian Watson will play. I don't really want to trust any other Green Bay wide receivers in this game. Dobbs is not even like in the flex conversation for anymore. Just somebody that you kind of want to keep on your bench because you don't know how much work he's going to get. And if you're desperate at wide receiver, this is for people in deeper leagues, it's Jaden Reed. But Musgrave is the one. If you can't get your hands on some of the other tight ends that we've mentioned, go after him. He could finish this week with the same type of numbers, if not a little bit better than what we got out of Sam Laporta on Thursday.
You're hopeful you don't have to start any of these guys, but the one guy you're definitely starting who gets another boost. Like we had the running joke of Aaron Jones has been second on the Packers 3 years in a row. Well, it's not going to happen this year because now they've got wide receivers. Well, he's probably going to be first on the targets today. I like Jones a lot at the top 12 running back. I like A.J. Dillon elevated as a really high-end flex. And then Luke Musgrave, I think he has to be in the top 15 conversation at tight end. When the bar is that low for top 12 production, it doesn't take much of a boost to get you up into that range.
But it's another guy, again, like Jawan Johnson, like Jake Ferguson. Now you're looking at maybe some long-term appeal because if he does get off to a good start, look, Watson battled a lot of injuries last season. Romeo Doubs, same thing. So this could be a go-to guy as they're revamping their entire receiving core. Remember, Robert Tonyan, no longer a member of the Packers. He's on the other side playing for the Bears. More bad news. Jerry Jeudy not expected to play today, dealing with his own hamstring injury. So they get the Raiders, and Cortland Sutton's had a very good history whenever Jerry Jeudy has been out. 4 times last year where Jeudy was either injured or missed the game. He had 12 or more PPR points in each outing without scoring a touchdown. So that's a good floor right there for him, and he did score in one of the games against the Raiders. And then one guy that I'm very intrigued about is Marvin Mims, who comes in as the rookie. Remember, this is the guy that Sean Payton's drafted, as opposed to inheriting Sutton and Jeudy. So, Keith, what do you think about the receivers there? And you could factor in Greg Dulcich as well. Again, another tight end that might have an opportunity against a Raiders secondary that tends to struggle.
I think Sutton's a must-start wide receiver if you start 3 wide receivers, and he's right there in consideration if you only start 2. He's been spectacular when there's been no Jerry Jeudy. He's going to lead this team in targets, a decent starter. Mims is really interesting just because of how much, watching him in college, he reminds me of Tyler Lockett. And we saw it a little bit in the preseason as well. And so him getting this opportunity to start, definitely somebody I want on my bench, not somebody I really want to start, but big time upside if that profile hits.
And this is almost the same thing as Green Bay. The injury to Jeudy could open up the run game and the options for what the Broncos can do on the ground. And I don't think it's going to be one guy that does it, and I don't think it's going to be just 2 guys either. I think the Broncos have 3 running backs that they feel pretty good about getting on the field. You know about Javonte Williams. He's the best of the bunch. He's the one that I would look at as a flex. Even in PPR leagues, I think he can catch a few passes in this game. Samaje Perine, I've really soured on him. Really don't see him as being someone that can help us in fantasy, a better bench player. But another guy to stash, and this is in deeper leagues, if you don't have any tight end issues, is Jaleel McLaughlin, their rookie running back. Very, very fast. They're looking for explosive players. He will see some playing time in their game against Las Vegas.
All right, so we'll see what happens there. I do think the report of Javonte Williams getting a big workload will be interesting to see if that comes to fruition, because if that happens and he stays healthy, you'll be thrilled about what he might become because he's coming back from that torn ACL last year, which happened in week 4 against the Raiders. Some other wide receiver injuries that we're keeping an eye on. Adam Thielen is expected to play, same with Marquise Brown. These are borderline number 3 receivers at best, just bad quarterback/matchup situations. Rondell Robinson out, Devontae Parker out. Heath, any interest in Juju Smith-Schuster maybe a little bit more now without Parker there?
I think he's a solid number 3 wide receiver. Listen, there was a report about his knee, and he's not been fully healthy for the last 5 years. But if he's healthy enough to play a full game, there's not anybody that should be taking targets away from him. Would not be surprised if we see 6, 7, 8+ targets in this game. I like him as a number 3 in PPR.
All right, so we'll see what happens. We actually have Tom Spencer coming up on the show later. He is at that game between the Patriots and the Eagles, and then Jonathan Mingo might have an opportunity here to step up without DJ Chark on the field. Some running back news that we should keep you up to date on. Again, we're going to have some information on that Patriots Eagles game coming up from Tom Spencer, but Ramondre Stevenson is expected to play. But Dave, hearing some rumbling that we could see every other series between Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott, you made the call that he's a reluctant start for you.
Yeah, in PPR. I'm sitting him in non-PPR.
You're sitting him in non-PPR. Okay, so make sense of this Patriots backfield in this matchup.
I wish I could, Jamie, but it's Bill Belichick, and it's a New England offense that's been befuddling us for years. I don't know if I can jump in with 2 feet on Ramondre Stevenson getting 60% of the workload and being a dynamo. I do think he can catch a lot of passes. And the fact that there's no Devontae Parker kind of opens the door for Ramondre to get at least 4 catches in the game. So in full PPR, I can't tell anybody to sit him. I'd lower expectations a little bit. I think Zeke's going to play at the goal line. I just think that that's a role that he's been proven to still be good at. The fact that there's a report that it's going to be every other series, that really grosses me out. And that offensive line for New England isn't that great. And on top of all that, they're playing Philadelphia. Their defense got younger, and I think they might have gotten better. So I'm very skeptical about all these Patriots players in week 1.
That same report, though, does indicate that the Patriots want to run the ball a lot in this game. So we could be looking at a lot of attempts, which could help both these guys. Or, as Dave alluded to with the matchup, could be a little problematic. Keith, quickly, we have the story that Jonathan Taylor is going to return in week 5, which is fantastic for anybody that invested with him in somewhere between like rounds 5 and 7. But for today, Zach Moss not going to go, dealing with the forearm injury. He's listed as doubtful, not officially out. Any interest in Deion Jackson or Evan Hull against the Jaguars?
They're both desperation flexes, and listen, we've talked about a lot of injuries. Some people are desperate. I do prefer Deion Jackson over Evan Hull. I think he is a mid-range flex option, probably looking at around 15 touches. The question is, when he starred is really probably not the right word, but when he had some success,
When
it's
he
because
played.
he caught a lot of passes. We don't expect Richardson to throw to his running backs very much, so it's a limited upside thing.
Yes, the best rusher today for the Colts will hopefully be Anthony Richardson. I did see one report that expect a lot of carries for him in this matchup. Speaking of quarterbacks, how good will Anthony Richardson be? We'll find out coming up after the break when we're talking about Richardson. And this guy, Tua Tagovailoa, the start of the week. Can he be a top 10, maybe top 5 quarterback against the Chargers?
Let's go.